right, so we can go ahead and get started. Thank you everyone for being here at Product Camp today. It's so great to kind of see all this come together. My name is Paul Timmermann. I'm one of the organizers with Product Camp. Also a speaker here today too, so like most product managers, wearing multiple hats in that way. And yeah, so excited to see everyone here, excited about this topic and kind of kick things off from that standpoint. So I know there is like the whole voting thing that happened in order to get everyone to get these topics here. So it was awesome to see the interest in this topic overall. So for those that were curious, thank you for the votes, and let's dive into things a little bit. So a bit of context, I guess, about who I am and why this topic kind of means so much to me. So I work at a company called TopTal. TopTal is a freelance marketplace for anyone that hasn't heard of it. We help connect the top 3% of talent with clients looking to hire those talent. And I work on our core team, which builds the products that help make that happen. We put a lot of emphasis on like building new products and technology to bring unique experiences to make that actually happen. And because of that, user research and understanding how our users are feeling and how we can make them more successful is an incredibly important part of that. And that's kind of the place I'm coming from. We overall see our marketplace in two larger personas, our talent users and our client users, and I lead up the client side of the product. So thinking about new ways to deliver those hiring experiences to our clients. And maybe a little bit of context about like what is this feedback river random thing that was mentioned in the title of this presentation, and to provide that context just to kind of get everyone started here today. So this is actually a concept. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the training organization Reforge. It was kind of mentioned in one of their courses one time. We took that concept and we really ran with it in my organization and forked that idea, if you will. And this is everything that we kind of built at this point, and some like practical ways in which we've been able to use this and continue to evolve it at our organization. And so essentially what a feedback river is at our company, it's a Slack channel, honestly. And feedback comes in, we process that feedback, we make sure that we capture some insights from it. And then because of that, we're able to put that into our insight database and leverage that for future decision makings and inform our product in that way. So what I want to talk to you about today, and kind of just to talk about some like overall goals that I'm hoping that everyone comes away from here today, is I want us to think differently about how we use user insights, all the different places that we can get user insights, and then how we use those to inform our decision making overall. And so I would love if everyone would leave here today and like build the feedback river exactly as I described. I recognize that that's not practical, and the tools that I'm going to be talking about today may not even apply to your organization, or maybe you're still kind of getting into product management and you're still thinking about that. But what I really want you to think about is we talk about user interviews all the time. It's like our classic research method, and we know that like practically speaking, we can't do that sometimes for a reason. Either our sales team doesn't want us to talk to our customers because we're awkward product managers and we're going to mess something up, or it's just like we don't have enough time to do that. I'll say that I haven't had a customer interview in probably well over 3 months at this point, and so what this provides is a good pulse to at least see how our customers are feeling. And it doesn't replace user research by any means, but it's a way to stay informed about customer pulse overall. Also very important. So because it's a river, it's important that you like lay into the river like facts and like cheesy jokes as much as possible. So like our river is like full of those, and I apologize that I've included a few of those throughout this presentation as well. So like the monologue, the Nile River actually is 4,130 miles long. So I'm sorry for the long monologue, but let's dive into the agenda now at this point. So I'm going to talk a little bit about why I think it's important to have a feedback river, some of the planning process that we did to make sure that we are set up for success. And honestly, that planning process was key to really how we set up our whole entire user insight database, which applies much broader than the feedback river. Some ways in which you can identify feedback streams, how you can build those out, and that's kind of the more practical piece that might not apply to everyone, but at least want to share. And then how we're able to pull insights into those and actually put those into action. So hopefully some practical things for everyone here today. So why build it? The rivers are full of very cute animals, very scary animals, and we kind of want the good and the bad of the ugly of our customer feedback. So we want that constant pulse. And this is a good way just to see how our customers are feeling. And because we enable this structured insight process on top of it, we're able to kind of take things away from that and really do something with that. Our initial version of the feedback river, it was really just that. It was a stream of feedback that we didn't actually capture it in any way. What we found was that there's a lot of great stuff that we saw, but we didn't have any, we just talked about it in passing. We didn't actually make any decisions based off of it. So we needed to add some structure around it to actually capture those insights and do something useful with it. As I mentioned, it's a very cheesy river, and because of that, it really enables team collaboration. It's a good bonding experience, really, to capture these together and kind of share the different things. And ultimately, where I think what we should all get to is being able to inform our product decisions. I will say that we haven't made a single decision solely based off of the feedback river, but what it does do is it helps inform those. So maybe it's future research that we need to do, maybe digging into a particular segment that we see something happening. Those are all things that we kind of get out of this. And one bonus, just the way in which we structured it personally, is as we find new places of feedback, or as we find that this feedback isn't useful anymore, it's flexible so that we can kind of swap out feedback and add new things as our product evolves. So planning your insights. So I think this is kind of the most important part to any sort of large project, is to be thoughtful in how you plan. I told you I was going to give you river facts. I'm going to deliver on those. For any of you that didn't know, the Chicago River used to run into the lake, right? And because typhoid was running rampant because people were drinking the dirty river water, they had to reverse the flow. And so we had to, the city of Chicago, had to plan the largest earth-moving operation in North America at the time. Actually, the people that did the Chicago River went on to build the Panama Canal because it was such a big project that they had to do. But of course, it took a lot of planning to do that in the first place. And we were thoughtful in our planning of our feedback river. And so one of the first things that we did, and I'm sure that everyone has some version of this, is we really had to go through and think about our user journey and break it down in kind of the key steps that our users are experiencing throughout our product. And so we could have made it a huge user journey with tons of steps. We found that it was important to kind of keep it as small as possible, just because we have to tag things against this later, and we'll kind of get into that, how that works. But defining the steps of the journey is important. And then we defined related feature areas kind of along that journey. So you have a journey map with a bunch of key journey steps. You have your feature areas, and you can kind of map everything against that. And just to kind of give an example of how that looks. So this is our journey map, and it's very low tech in that way. But it's from a top-down perspective, our clients onboard. They go through a matching process where we kind of help to understand their needs a little bit more. Then they work with a dedicated recruiter to make sure that those are clearly defined. They go through the interviewing and hiring process. They get a free trial. Then hopefully they like that talent. 90% of the time they do, and they go on to an active engagement and then post-engagement. So a pretty obvious user journey, but it was super helpful to map all this out, because now anytime we do user research, not just against the feedback river, we map it against these journey steps, and it's super useful to pull those back later, tell me everything that's going on in the trial phase. And it organizes your user research database in a super well way. And I'm saying user research database like it's something super fancy. It's an Airtable table, but it is tagging everything against that, and it's super useful from that perspective. All right, and then we have our feature areas just to kind of show the different things that are here. So you could imagine whatever features that you would map against that. So that's what we built first. We wanted to categorize all of our feedback that's coming in. So we built this map and went through that activity. I do want to make this kind of interactive along the way. So certainly interrupt me if you have questions. And speaking of interaction, anyone that, if you want to do on your phones or on paper, it doesn't really matter, whatever you have. I want everyone to take 3 minutes to kind of map out what this is for your product. Or if you don't have a product that would make sense to do that, think about a product that this could apply to. We're going to use this later, so it's useful to kind of go through this activity now. I'm going to hope that this embedded YouTube video actually works. This is where it does, and there's no sound, but there is a beep at the very end that may or may not play. We'll see. But I'll give everyone 3 minutes to kind of fill this out real quick. And again, it'll be super useful for the next activity from that perspective. And certainly if you have any questions about how you might think about this, let me know. All right, yeah, 1 more minute to think through your boxes, lines, make sure that they're perfectly aligned. Other fun fact, when I was putting this together, I had no idea that you can literally Google any sort of timer, and there's every variation of this. So if you needed a 72-minute timer, there's probably one of those on YouTube as well. So. Okay. So thank you everyone for doing that. Like I said, this was an important activity for us. One, because it helped us, document our feedback, but also for the next piece of this, I promised that it wasn't going to be a waste of work here. But we needed to identify our streams next. And so our streams are all the different sources of feedback that come into our feedback river, and how it informs what we're getting from our customers. And so I have a few examples of things up here. NPS, CSAT, our review sites, things like Trustpilot and things of that nature. Of course, customer service tickets, chat logs. Interesting story with those. Those for us, every company is different, but for TopTal, the chat logs are actually one of the most useful pieces of feedback that we receive. And the reason is because our product by nature should be self-service. It should be able to find things. And so whenever you need to reach out to your account manager to ask a question, like those are obvious things that we just didn't think about before. And maybe the account managers are great and the client is actually overall happy, so you don't really see that show up in like NPS or something because they were really excited by the service that the account manager provided. But of course, like it's kind of where our product failed. Sales call records, if your company uses anything like Gong or any of those kind of sales call recording tools. And then also our user research records. Anytime we do a user interview, that's like maybe one of the best sources of user feedback, but those also go into the river. So this just kind of gives you some ideas of things that go there. And what we were able to do with our map is kind of take this overall map that we had and put together, And we were able to map our feedback streams against this. And so I included, some more specific things that we actually have. So anytime a salesperson has a call that is recorded, those go into it. Posting a job is an important part of our user journey. And so you might not think about that as user feedback, but it kind of gives us a pulse of like, these are the types of things that customers are actually asking our company for. And so it's a good reminder that like, this is what our actual core service is. And it helps kind of ground us in that. And also you might see something interesting like, oh, there's a new type of job that's trending that we didn't think about before. And again, getting a pulse of that. As I mentioned, chat logs, customer service tickets, feature satisfaction. So I don't know how often people here are running satisfaction surveys on their features, but on a few like more flagship features at the end of that feature journey, we ask like, how are you like rated on a scale of 0 to 5? And then also like the free text. And so for most of the stuff, I don't really care as much about the scores. Like they're in the previous session, it was kind of already alluding to like not liking NPS scores and things like that. But what I care about is more the actual text input. And really if it, for our purposes, I want all of the bad feedback. And so we sort it by like, give us the worst feedback, but only the ones that have comments. And that helps us at least understand the people that are actually feeling pain with our product. Like, what is that pain? Let's see what's the end. Oh, yeah, and we talked about the other ones. So that gives you a feel for what's there. So what we were able to do is, oh, yes, sorry. How many teams do you have spread across here? Like, is there a team for feature area? How does that relate to the streams that are relevant in feedback? Yes, good question. So I would say that our teams are mostly split over the journey steps, actually. And so that's pretty representative of the teams that report to me. And so, and these, the feature areas and especially the feedback streams are certainly like, you might have a sales call at any point in this journey. Like it shows up more at the beginning, but it could happen anywhere. So I'd say that it's not like super specific. Maybe something that's more applicable to our product, but could anyone that's kind of in a more service-oriented product, what happens kind of at the beginning of the journey really impacts how the bottom of the journey works, essentially. And so it's useful for everyone to kind of, even if it's not directly related to your area, kind of see the pulse of how customers are feeling. Maybe there's a new problem that we didn't even know kind of are happening upstream to our customers that we can solve better downstream. So I'd say we do have two feedback streams though, like one for our talent person, or one for our talent persona, one for our client one. So we separate it that way, but all of our client product managers see the single client feedback stream, as well as the design team and the engineers as well. So. Yes. Yes, and so there are a lot of interesting questions that we can kind of ask from this. I'd say this is a data collection process, and I'll get into some like practical ways in which we use that for strategic thinking towards the end. But yeah, I'd say and this is kind of what we found is like the problem with the initial concept of the feedback river is if you really wanted to build kind of what we read about at the time, we'd stop here and you'd have a lot of feedback, and feedback's great, but like we wanted to do something practical with it. We wanted to inform our strategy with it. And that's kind of the part that I wanted to get to next here and kind of share with everyone today and how we did that as well. Other questions here? Yeah. Yes. I'd say anytime we are exploring a new feature or a new product strategy, this is a kind of our go-to first source of information, this database that we're building. Like, yeah, I'm curious about what we should be pursuing in the interviewing and hiring space. So I go into our insights database, I say, give me everything that we know about interviewing and hiring, and it kicks you out kind of all this feedback that we've received. And so it adds so much structure to what we have there that otherwise, yeah, I think we're just kind of dealing with so much unstructured feedback, and that's kind of what we get out of it. It's a good question. We don't, yeah, prospecting is something that handled more by our marketing team, so it's kind of outside of our scope. But I think it certainly like could be part of this if we wanted to. So I would agree that if we wanted to do a more full, like even outside of product journey map, it'd be a key piece, and we'd probably want to pull that in here as well. Yes. Uh-huh. Yes. Yep. Yeah. So this actually was kind of to solve that, because I can't tell you how many times I said, hey, sales team, can you please give me all the feedback that you receive? It'd be super useful. Or like, hey, customer success, like, please tell me what our customers are saying. And you end up just getting like a log of feature requests that don't make any sense, right? And I wanted to see the real feedback, and that's kind of what we tried to do here. So instead of receiving the interpretation of what this actually means, we receive the full chat log, and it's kind of on us to kind of interpret what that means. And instead of seeing, the in summary of that ticket, we see like the whole entire ticket history, and that's kind of the point of this, is that it's on us to interpret that, because I think that we're thinking about the user a lot differently than the rest of the people in the organization. And yeah, I would love to train sales and customer success to kind of give us the perfect user problem, but that's just not how they think, and that's why we're product managers at the end of the day too, right? Other questions here? All right, practicality again. You had your maps that you built already. I want you to think a little bit about what sort of feedback things you have there today, and add to your map just some ideas of different things that you can be looking towards. And if we, as you kind of get through things, I think they'll do this in just a single 3-minute session. Share it with your neighbor, and maybe there's an interesting idea as well that you might have that your neighbor didn't have, and vice versa. So yeah, think about the different areas that you can actually receive feedback in your product today. Write those down. And I also want you to kind of keep those in the back of your mind, because when we're thinking about strategies to kind of put those into the feedback river at a later point, this will be useful to kind of have this as well. So I will start our pencil timer. Yeah, and as you add things in here, feel free to share with your neighbor too. Were the feedback wise? All right. All right. Any interesting feedback sources anyone came up with they want to share? Or interesting holes in your feedback that you wish that you could access that maybe you thought about? It's like, wow, I wish that I could collect feedback on that, but I can't today. Anything like that that came up? Or yeah, anything people want to share based on your conversations that, yes, go ahead. Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. Sure. Okay. Yes. Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, this is certainly much more geared towards like more qualitative user feedback. And certainly like that could play into the technical product strategy ultimately, right? And maybe there are challenges that our users are feeling that is more deeply rooted in a technical problem. So I would say that the technical product managers that we do have in our organization that are related to client, they are still looking at this. And it does kind of rely on them to know a little bit more about how the systems work and understand like, is that a problem that maybe is related to my technical product? But yeah, we don't have any direct like technical things that come from this. It is yeah much more of a qualitative feature in that way. Other questions or things that kind of came up in those discussions? Yes, go ahead. Mm-hmm. Right.
when did it become a problem for them? When they lost a lot of customers.
Right.
So, yeah, anyway, that's
Interesting. Interesting. Yeah, I'd say we no, like I said, no decision came directly from our feedback river. It provides us this pulse. There's like that business context where like hopefully this feedback actually you've identified the sources that are important, and this feedback shows up, and it's kind of becomes an onus on the product team at that point to decide like, is this a problem worth exploring more? But yeah, when does it make sense to make those strategic business decisions is a tough call that we ultimately have to make, right? Yes, go ahead.
I'm not sure if you'll get into this later, but do you have any comments about weighting the feedback? What do you count more than others?
Sure, sure. No specific things later on like weighting the feedback. I'd say that it is important that we have a product strategy kind of taking from the last session of like this is the direction that we want to go. And because of that, we may choose to intentionally like not care so much about a particular piece of feedback, which of course like pains me. I'd love to solve everyone's problems, but if that's kind of out of misalignment with the overall strategy, like there's some discussions at that point of like, do we need to change our strategy, or like, is this a problem that we're intentionally not doing? And I think that having that strategic lens makes it a lot easier to process how much weight we should put on this feedback. I think there's a question that, oh, yes, go ahead.
I guess we were talking a little bit about it, and one of the issues that we face is there's so many feedback streams.
Mm-hmm.
Where to keep it all.
Yes.
From all of the different areas. We're just kind of implementing Jira's new like product discovery tool,
Mm-hmm.
but it's like very manual.
Yes.
And we have a lot like there's no way of like really integrating it with like any of the other things to just get it streamed in there right away.
Yeah.
And so I guess that's just kind of it's really tough for us right now.
Yes, yes. I will go on a bit of a tangent anecdote at this point. So we shared with our executives this feedback river, and they loved it. They said like, this can give us so much insight on how our business is doing. And one of the executives at the time said, I want my own feedback river. But I don't like your river that's like more of like a puddle. Like I want all the feedback. And he wanted everything to be put into there. And we said like, that seems like a lot. I think you're going to get overwhelmed. And he said, I don't care. And we put all the different sorts of feedback, kind of all of this, but like every single type of feedback you could possibly imagine into that. And the first day we turned on that channel, there's like 600 pieces of feedback in there. And of course, like as quickly as it turned on the channel, we turned it off because that's just way too much. The way in which we implemented it, we only get one item from each of these every single day. And so it's very like a small trickle from that perspective, but it gives us that pulse and it gives us a chance to process it. Because the second that, yeah, just feedback that you're not really paying any attention to, then it becomes a lot less useful. We have to be super intentional on like how we surface that. And that's where I was saying that like, if we receive multiple NPS scores in a day, I personally prefer the pain. And so I sort it by the worst NPS score and like, give me that one. But that's kind of how we've had to be intentional and essentially like rejecting some feedback because it just doesn't even get into our stream in the first place, rather than trying to accept all of it and do something with it. Now, I'm sure there's cool tools like sentiment analysis and like all kinds of ML type of analysis you could do if you're trying to analyze an entire stream. But our strategy here is actually like, just give us the pulse and a sample essentially, and we'll kind of deal with that sample and deal with the sample risk of that as well. So does that make sense? That's a question in the back. To do that, it's we use Segment.io for most of our event tracking, and Segment has a integration with Slack. And so to set that up initially, we just said like, send all the Segment events over to Slack, and they went over there. But yeah, for us, actually everything is integrated from like a BigQuery to Google Sheets connection, and then that gets dumped into the channel. And I'll kind of show you a little bit about how that works a little bit later. So yeah. Ariel, here's a question.
I was just, you said you filter based off the pain, and I was wondering if, do you collect positive feedback? Are you looking for it, and what do you do with it?
So yeah, I love positive feedback as well. It makes me feel like we're actually doing something good at the end of the day. It'd be depressing if it was just like, terrible things all the time. And I can say that our feedback does trend pretty positive overall. So you do see a lot of positive things in there. I would say that we capture insight much less from that. So every time a feedback comes in, it's kind of on us to decide, like, is there actually something insightful here? And if someone just says, like, you're awesome, like, what am I supposed to do with that, right? If they do say, like, you're awesome because this part of your product works really well, like, that's useful. But if it's just like the plain positive feedback, it's great to hear. Maybe it's a motivational thing, but we don't actually capture any structured feedback from that. Yeah, go ahead.
One of the concerns I have with this is just maybe 3 cents to go back to the law saying, like, oh, this is a great way to sort of see how the business is doing,
Mm-hmm.
which to me implies a much greater trust in the sort of quality of the data / fitting / everything else to turn it into a metric, which you're pretending as being and that you don't.
Uh-huh.
And so I'm very nervous. It's sort of like story points.
Yep.
Starts out as a tool for conversation within a team, and then becomes a basis for rating people from 3 levels up, and that's a net negative. So I'm trying to figure out how this gets used in a safe way.
Yes.
and then the other piece of it that comes to mind is sort of the classic Henry Ford of if I ask people what they want, they say faster horse. So in a sense, I think any feedback is useful to like fit into a mental model and then go do research.
Yep.
But I feel like what I've seen even with low volume, sloppy feedback collection is that it does tend to create a lot of de facto push on feature requests. Like
Mm-hmm.
you said this, so we should do this, and there's no thinking in between those 2 steps. And so I feel like this has a high risk of increasing reactive
Yep.
action.
Yeah, I think that that's very fair. And I hope that if anyone goes and implements this, that you don't see a piece of feedback come in your feedback river and immediately start building that feature. This is intended to inform, it mainly informs user research, and it informs product strategy. So as a product manager, I'm thinking about my quarterly roadmap for next quarter, and I want to know, like, what are the big challenges my customers are facing right now? This is a good starting point. I'm thinking about building out my user research backlog for the next quarter as well. And I want to know, like, what are the things I want to learn more about? These are kind of those points. We don't have any like metrics coming out of this. Yeah, we don't say that, like, oh, we've addressed feedback river item number 6, 7, 8. This is purely meant to be a better way to manage qualitative feedback is really how I would describe that. Other questions here? Yes, go ahead. So, I mean, this feedback river is running every day. And so if I only see it one time, we probably don't pay a whole lot of attention to it. Because there's kind of this constant pulse from it, what we find is the features that we've kind of built or the research that we've done that's been inspired by the feedback river, there's a theme here. You can kind of see it in some way. And I'll talk about some strategies to like do that theming in a bit. But yeah, I'd say that for the most part, this is kind of intentional on our side because we just can't process all the feedback. If something only shows up one time, it's probably not going to be addressed, even if it is a huge opportunity that we didn't really think about. But that's kind of maybe the downside of the way in which we're doing this is we do look for the trends in that feedback later. And it needs to be something that would show up multiple times from that perspective. It's random, but we put some preference on like the types of feedback that we want to receive. So yeah, for our NPS, that's probably the best one, that we sort by the worst NPS to the best NPS and like give us the worst one. For chat logs with our customers, I'm looking for the longest conversation, because there's like obviously something happening there. And so I think you have to think about each feedback source individually, like what would actually be useful feedback for you. And that kind of becomes part of your stream building strategy in that way. But honestly, like we turned them all on and kind of did some sampling, and then we built some business rules as to like what's actually useful for us from that perspective, and that's how we decided what ended up in the river. What I would say is it's constantly changing, and there's new streams forming, and there's old streams that we're kind of turning off all the time, just based off of kind of going back and seeing, are we still getting useful feedback from this? Are we learning something new from this? So it's always kind of evolving from that perspective, but we are intentional in like what actually goes in there in the first place, which probably introduces some bias here and there, but I think that it's kind of a choice between that or just seeing everything and kind of not listening to anything, right? Yes, go ahead. No. This is strictly user feedback, and that's kind of how we position this as well. So, but yeah, I'd say if senior leadership feedback is important and they are an important user, I could kind of see that being the case. But in our case, like our users are our client users, and so that's the feedback that I care about here. Yes, go ahead.
A lot of the feedback streams seem like they could bias towards people who have negative interactions.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have I guess, how do you look for opportunities to like things that are working?
Sure. Yeah, I'd say this ends up being negative-ish. Although I'd say that like there's some positive things that are here, especially the ones that are more random. I'd say that this isn't really a great source for things that are going well, and like that's where you're kind of always in this tricky situation. Honestly, like a funny story about the feature satisfaction score. So when we first put this in, we said like how easy or difficult was this feature to use. And we thought that would be a useful thing to get. We were kind of hoping to get like really bad scores so we'd have something to improve. And we were getting like our average score is like 4.8 out of 5 on like a lot of our features, which is great. But as someone that like wants to improve things, like it was statistically impossible to like improve on top of that. And so we had to like change our questioning to make it like to lower the score in some way and make it harder. And so we changed it to how, compared to your expectations, how easy or difficult was that to use? And like actually adding that key phrase there ended up dropping the score a little bit. So total tangent, but just saying that, yeah, we have to look kind of other places if we're kind of looking for things that are going well. So, all right, we have a few minutes left. So I did want to talk about, so you have to get creative when it comes to building these streams. And that's where, yeah, we're building rafts out of PVC pipes essentially. So this is our stack. And if anyone has any of these tools, I'm happy to kind of nerd out on how we integrated them all later. But we're a big Google shop, so we're able to use BigQuery integrations with Sheets and then use Slack workflows to get those into Slack. There's also some interesting integrations you can do between Gong and Slack and Segment and Slack. So just saying that kind of, especially with tools like Zapier and all that out there, like there's ways to get the feedback into one place. But really what we wanted to do is get the feedback into one place everyone is paying attention to. In that case for us, we're a Slack kind of based organization overall, so it made sense to put this all into a Slack channel. And then I did promise some recipes here. So yeah, these are kind of our big ones. So we use connected sheets in BigQuery to pull the data into the Google Sheet that runs like on a daily basis. It pulls most of the feedback that we have kind of into that sheet. Someone asked a question earlier on like, how do you make sure it's formatted correctly? Like we do like the fancy formatting in that data pool, so we kind of get it into a way that's like useful to actually look at. And then we publish that along to a Slack channel. So same thing goes for Gong calls. Whenever a sales, this is actually, there was a question earlier on how do we get the right type of feedback from sales? Something we did, instead of sales saying like, hey, tell me what you heard from this customer, we added a tag in Gong where it's like @product management. And what that does is when they do that, it sends an email to our Gmail, and then we forward that along to Slack. And so it sends us the call, and we can get context of what they talked about and actually listen to that, rather than like kind of get their version of it, which probably is accurate, but who knows, right? And then finally, anyone that uses Slack, destinations is an easy way to push things over. But I'm happy to nerd out on all these if anyone has any of these tools and wants to talk about them later. Yes, go ahead. Segment, yeah, we use for most of our, Segment is a very powerful tool. We use it strictly for like event tracking and pushing stuff over to Slack, which is sad, the amount of money that we pay for Segment, and that's all we do. Yeah, most of our event tracking is through Segment. So if it's things where a user is like inputting some feedback data, that's probably in Segment. But honestly, most of it comes from BigQuery. That's our warehouse, and we're pretty good about getting everything into our warehouse. And so it's a matter of pulling that back out of our warehouse and putting it into the Slack channel. Oh, the review on most of them have like integration. So actually for Trustpilot, we just have the Trustpilot integration pushing stuff in there. Go ahead, Eric.
What do you do about data like the identities attached to the data? Like, is there anything that's like confidential that you have to like clean before you put in Slack?
Not really, because like our Slack kind of handles the privacy pieces of that. We do, yeah, I guess the cleanup is on the input side of it mainly. So it's kind of on the teams kind of implementing those to make sure that the PII and everything is kind of handled up front. So we can kind of trust that if it's coming from these sources, that's kind of handled up front. So yeah, good question though. Go ahead.
So just to understand the mechanics on the Slack side, so you have like a channel that just like
Yes.
randomly pulsing, and it's like, what's the volume of like hundreds of messages?
Like 10 messages a day. And we have it set up where I have a schedule that at 8 o'clock, the Slack or the chat logs with customer service come in. And at 9 o'clock, if there's any sales calls from yesterday, they come in. So it's like set up so like every hour something comes in. So you have something to read in between meetings. And yeah, that it's a nice, steady, like lazy river, not like a crazy river, right? So
it's just for that time period. It's not. It's not cumulative like for the whole month.
No. It's just like what happened yesterday, and if there is something there, drops into the channel. So this is super small. I apologize for it, but this is kind of an example of how it works. So here's our Trustpilot stream. So Trustpilot had this positive comment from a customer, but they did mention that what they liked was our process was easy and efficient. So like efficiency was important to them. So then you can react to it and add. This is honestly the biggest mistake. I created an anchor here and not a fishing rod, but now we're kind of set. So the workflow works where if you react with an anchor, it kicks off this workflow. And now we kind of get back to the journey mapping that we did at the beginning. So you capture like, what did you actually observe here? You put in what journey step was it on, what features it related to, and then like a celebration at the end where it says like, good job, you captured it, and it saves all this into a Google Sheet. And then that Google Sheet forwards us over to Airtable, and that's how it gets to our Insight database. So it's a little bit of manual work. Certainly like you have to go through and process each of these, but because again, it's only 10 or so at max a day, it's manageable. And especially because it's an entire product team looking at this, it's a manageable amount, and it gives us that pulse. And that's kind of how it works in a practical sense. Go. It is everyone. It kind of took a while to build that culture, but I think it's something where if you see people doing it, you want to do it, and I think the transparency of the channel kind of adds to that. And maybe there's like I don't know, some sort of gamification of it because people want to react that kind of happens over time. So yeah. It's the product team, the research team, design team, and engineering team are all in this channel together. I'd say that mostly product managers are the ones that actually react to this. So go ahead.
But if something, you've got basically a semi-random selection of what goes into your Slack first place.
Yep.
Only those items get tagged and show up in your Insight database. So if there was a raw piece of feedback that didn't happen to hit the Slack channel, that doesn't appear anywhere else.
Correct. Yeah. So what we can actually do with this, I'm going to speed ahead kind of to the end. So like, how do we actually put this in action? So on a weekly basis, we kind of have our readout on like all the insights that were captured this week. So like all the insights that people put in, we post another Slack message back out saying like, here's all the insights that we captured. And we've done interesting things about throwing that through GPT as well. We tried to just put like all the raw feedback into that because we were interested in what happened, and it gave us garbage as you'd kind of imagine. But we found that like by giving these more structured insights into it, that was super valuable. As I mentioned, like as a product manager, I'm thinking about doing some discovery in the next like quarter. Like this is kind of a good starting point of like, what do I know about this area? Or I have this feature idea that I'm thinking about. Do we have any feedback that we've gotten from the feedback river that is interesting from that standpoint? Yeah, our research studies, we've informed quite a few of them out of this, so it's a good starting point for that as well. Something that I've kind of done just to kind of reinforce the idea of why this is good is whenever we do have a feature that's delivered that was inspired in some way by the feedback river, I reference that because I think it's a good marketing tool that we should continue using this. And there's one question like, are we talking to the right clients and all that? And I think it's something that we have to be strategic about of like, are our streams getting outdated? Are we kind of getting new, fresh insights? And when we need to identify new segments of feedback, new segments of users, that kind of becomes, as the river manager, in a way, my job to make sure that we're kind of rotating those out, which there's not really a great way to do it, but it's something we have to be conscious of. So that way we don't end up missing feedback ultimately. I know that we're at time. But I want to say thank you. I wrote an article for Reforge about this that kind of has all the nuts and bolts. So if you wanted to take a look at it, it kind of goes into a lot more detail. So feel free to read that. But that is what I have for you today. Thank you so much for everything.